So our next speaker is going to be Dr. James January-McCann, who is the Place Name Officer for Wales, and his role is based upon the statutory requirement of the Historic Environment for Wales Act. So his job mainly concerns gathering details about Welsh place names, historic place names, and he also advises local councils and governments, and that's what he's going to talk to us about today, how he collects the names and the usages in which they are used. James.
Right. Apologies for getting the date wrong. This is definitely the right slideshow. Yes, so as Scott said, I'm basically here to talk about the list of historic place names, which was set up as a result of the 2017 Historic Environment Wales Act. And basically, why do we have that? What is it and what do we do with it? So as to why do we have it, as I'm sure you're all aware, place names is something of a hot topic in Wales and continues to be. Specifically the idea that we're losing place names. And more specifically, again, the idea that we're losing Welsh language place names, which in many cases are centuries old, and that they're being replaced by English language place names that generally were made up by some bloke from Birmingham on his holidays last week. And obviously, I'm allowed to say that, I'm from Portsmouth. To give you an example of this, on the top left there, we have, can I make this thing work? No, apparently I can't. Middle button. Excellent, here we go. Lleoedd. Lleoedd is a farm outside Llandysul. Lleoedd is basically a manorial settlement, so it's the centre of the hamlet or the township. That's the word I was looking for in English. Trefgorth. And so that's, where you go to pay your taxes, where the administration happens. It's an important site. Lleoedd, we've got attested back at least 500 years. So you've got, as I say, at least 500 years of language, land use, all the information included in that name in Welsh, and then Happy Donkey Hill. Because it's now a donkey sanctuary, and at least we know the donkeys are happy, so that's the main thing. We've also got Plas Glyn Llifon up by Caernarfon, one of the homes of the Watkins-Williams-Wynn dynasty, major sort of gentry family in the northwest. My father-in-law is very fond of telling people that you could walk from their land in the northwest and reach the border without ever leaving their land. In 2016, the house was put on the market under the name Wimborne Hall, on the basis that a house with a Welsh name wouldn't sell. Because as we know, there's not much Welsh up by Caernarfon, is there? Speaking from the point of view of someone from, as I mentioned, Portsmouth, Bourne is a chalky stream. It's a dialect word from where I grew up. There's no chalk up there either. The name isn't even right in English, if you see what I mean. This is what happens when you just, we'll call it something nice. Yeah. Disappointingly close to my house, we have Bwlch Einion, which is a farm in Cwm Einion. Further down the valley from Blaen Einion. Through it, the river Einion flows through it. You're seeing what I'm getting at here. All the names in the valley tie into each other. However, the farmer a couple of years ago decided to open a glamping business up there. It's very nice, it's beautiful. And he thought, right, as we all know, tourism is impossible in a country that uses a language other than English. Tourists will explode if they see the name Bwlch Einion. No one here's ever been to France, have they? It's impossible. I certainly wasn't there last week. So he thought, right. He looked around the farm, well, it's up a mountain, and you can see the sea. So lo and behold, the name Mountain Sea View appears. This isn't just about me slating the tourist industry, second homes as well. Who else are we angry with in Wales at the moment? I'll work them. Yeah, holiday cottage here, Little Pudding Cottage. Or, as it's actually called, Pont Bren Ddu. And if you look on the map, wouldn't you know, it's next to a Pontbren, a footbridge. And I am reliably informed by the local postman that it is quite dark. So there you go, Pontbren the. Explains the name, it makes perfect sense. However, it's now a holiday cottage, and obviously, again, tourists got to call it something appealing, haven't you? Little Pudding Cottage. Now, as well as being incredibly annoying, the problem with Little Pudding Cottage is it's in the middle of nowhere in Breconshire. And what that means is that it is an isolated dwelling, and thus the house name appears on the OS map. Lo and behold, if you look at your OS map in that part of Breconshire, what do you see? Little Pudding Cottage. This is not just a thing that affects houses, by the way. This up here is Dinorwig Quarry. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, when you're digging into the countryside to get your slate out, you do it in levels, don't you? Ponciau in Welsh. Each ponc has a name. They're named sometimes by the quarry owners, sometimes by the quarrymen themselves. Some of them reference particular individuals. There's a couple of ones named after the quarry owners' daughters. There's Ponc Robin Rabar is one of the quarrymen himself. Some of them reference the names of houses that had disappeared as the quarry expanded. There's a particularly excellent one right at the top, which is called Tophet, which is one of the levels of hell in the Bible. And it's because before you started your 9-hour shift in the quarry, you had to walk all the way up to the very top. However, in recent years, the quarry is obviously closed, and these sites have become particularly popular with climbers. And it is a convention in the climbing community that if you're the first person to go up a particular route, you get to name the route. Which is lovely. This is not a problem. You're not renaming the cliff or the crag or anything like that. No, you're just naming the route. Okay, fine. Except, of course, that the OS has decided to import some of these names for routes and put them on the blank areas of their map. So look forward to things like Mordor and Looning the Tube level. Something had to be done. Something that was done was the Historic Environment Wales Act 2016, which, amongst other things, established a duty on the Welsh Government to curate and compile a list of historic place names that would serve as not just a fascinating resource in and of itself, but as an evidence basis for these kind of decisions. Why can't I call my house Pretty Pony Paddock? Because it's been called this for 500 years. Look at all the evidence. So, most importantly, obviously, I am legally obliged to exist, which is lovely. But also, if you want to change the name of your house, you have to write to your county council, asking for permission, essentially, and then they consult the list of historic place names and various other sources, and to see whether it's historic or not, essentially. And if it is, our working definition of historic, by the way, is at least 100 years old. So if the name is historic, they write back to you with basically an information pack explaining about the importance of the Welsh language, history, heritage, place names, that sort of thing. And they ask you very kindly to change your mind. You then have a 10-day cooling off period to think about it, but at the end of that, if you absolutely want to go ahead and change the name of your house, it is your property, you are allowed to. But, of course, the name is preserved in the list of historic place names, so that in several hundred years, the descendants of people who lived there before you can come back and they can find Rhosagadfa, even though it's called Pretty Pony Paddock, on the plaque. So, how are we doing with that? Have to apologise here because data is very sketchy, largely because the street naming and numbering officers in each council are hideously overworked and don't really appreciate me bothering them all the time. But I have got something of a picture, which is to say in Gwynedd, they've been able to stop about 50% of proposed name changes, which doesn't sound like a lot until you drill into the details And you realise that what this means is that all across Gwynedd, when people actually have it explained to them why this sort of thing is important, they change their minds, they realise, they go, oh, of course, no, we've got to keep the historic name. I understand now. Except in Abersoch. But, nobody was surprised there, were they? Another interesting stat from Gwynedd, though, of new names, so this is houses being named for the first time, or new houses being built and a plaque put on the wall, 94% of them are being named in Welsh. In Ceredigion, in 2020, we had 10 changes from English to Welsh, only one from Welsh to English, which would seem to suggest, actually, the process is going the other way. And of new names, they had 230 in Welsh and only 11 in English. So again, similar level to Gwynedd. When people want a name for their house, they want a Welsh name, basically. And I'm very pleased to say that as a result of Ceredigion's particularly proactive implementation of these policies, in 2024 we did not lose a single Welsh place name in Ceredigion. Lleoedd. In Powys, where I live, in 2017 to 2019, they had about 70 changes. Again, most of them English to Welsh. Ynys Môn have seen an improvement since this policy was brought in, but no one's told me how much of an improvement and where. Merthyr Tydfil's an interesting one. They're not losing Welsh place names, but what they are seeing is in exactly the same way as Gwynedd and Ceredigion. When people want to call their house something, they want to name it in Welsh. And as Scott mentioned at the start, this isn't just a thing that's done about house names. It also affects street naming. So as you can see from the bottom there, the Swansea street naming and numbering officer has been fantastic about this and has sort of embraced it with both hands. So once all of the estates that were planned in the financial year 2022 to 2023 are actually built, for the first time in its history, Swansea County will have a majority of Welsh language street names. And, of course, they're historic Welsh language street names as well. I haven't just made them up. So to give you a few examples of sort of things we get, I get basically council officers writing to me and saying, you know, either someone's asked to change the name of their house, can you provide us evidence to say as to why we should say no, or that sort of thing, or we're building a new block of flats here, can you suggest some names? And what I do is I look in our database and basically I offer things like, you know, the names of the fields that the estate's being built on, name of the stream that runs through it, name of the house that was there a couple of centuries ago but has since disappeared, that sort of thing. And as you can see, Caerphilly and Swansea are the big two in on this. They seem to be concreting over the whole of the south. And very nicely is here, quite a lot of requests from Powys, which I'm particularly pleased about because this comes after the County Council built a new estate outside of Newtown and named all of the streets in English with absolutely no links whatsoever to the area. And I wrote them a very angry email. And since then, they've consulted me about absolutely everything. Funny that. Now, the list itself. It is freely available to the public. This isn't just a thing for councils. You can all see it too. It is available on our website, which is fully bilingual. You get the link at the end. So you can do absolutely everything in Welsh. You can do absolutely everything in English. You can flip merrily between the two. This is our homepage, by the way, with, nicely in keeping for this, lovely map of the local area. There's Aberystwyth, there's Llanpatern Fawr, and of course, Llanfihangel Castle Gwalter, Llandre, or Llanfihangel Genna'r Glyn. Pick your favourite. We've got a blog, which is updated, honestly, not as often as it should be, with things like, oh, we found a fantastic new source, I'm going to tell you a bit about it, you know, new developments in the list, that sort of thing. Basically sort of a regular progress update. Those of you who read Welsh will also notice there are bad jokes, which, let's face it, you're used to those by, 5 minutes of me talking. And for those of you who don't speak Welsh, this is possibly the most important page on the website. This is our glossary, because you always get 2 questions with Welsh place names, don't you? Number 1, what does it mean? Number 2, how do you say it? So, this is our attempt, basically, to have people stop asking me if they're on the road to Machynlleth. No idea, sorry. So, that has happened. That's not me exaggerating, that has happened. So, to the left, where you might not be able to see it there, we have our element. Now, this is basically the building blocks of place names. Things like, mawr, bach, tre, llan, bryn, mynydd, etc., etc. Translation of the element, so that you know what it means. Couple of examples of place names using said element, and then on the right, a sound file. So you can listen to a fluent Welsh speaker, me. In Welsh, I sound very Welsh. Okay, it's not, and some bloke from Portsmouth. It does make sense. Anyway, fluent Welsh speaker, as I say, vaguely Gwynedd, pronouncing the element, so you'll actually be able to hear how it's said as well. You'll notice we don't include a translation of the place name, because what we found is that if you do that, people use the translation as the English version, and there isn't an English version of Machynlleth, for obvious reasons. Also, if you click on the element, you'll note they're blue, it will take you to a page like this. So if we use the word bwbach, which is goblin or a bogeyman, and just an excellent word, you'll note that we currently have 21 place names in the list that use the word bwbach. So we have things like As de Bwbach, steep wooden slope of the goblin, Bryn Bwbach, Kai Bwbach, personal favourite, and again, worryingly close to my house, Kai Ffynnon Bwbach, Field of the Goblin's Well. Maybe don't drink from that one. And if you click on map there again, it takes you to a map, obviously, showing you where all of the Bwbachod live. And then if you scroll down and click on one of them, it will take you to a page like this. So this is Twll y Bwbach, which is a lovely place name in Welsh and doesn't translate well into English. Now, Twll y Bwbach is a house on a hill just above Dolgellau. And we have a page like this for every single name in the list. So it will tell you what type of place name it is. It's a settlement. They're divided into various categories, all of which have colour-coordinated pins. So settlements are blue. Those are everything up from, a individual house to Cardiff. Fields are green for obvious reasons. Topographical features, your rivers, your lakes, your hills, that kind of thing, they're yellow. Civil parishes, pre-1974, are brown. Other administrative areas, so things like your cwmwds, your cantorefs, your hundreds, your townships, that sort of thing, they are a particularly unattractive shade of vomit brown. And everything that doesn't really fit in that, so things like churches, chapels, pubs, roads, they're red, right? Very nice and simple. Except, when the list was launched in 2017, we were a bit pushed for time, so everything from the Cynefin project, which I'll talk about in a bit, well, that's all field, so that'll go in green. And absolutely everything else went in red, and we'll sort it out later. So this is 8 years on, right? Over the course of those 8 years, I have spent an average of 2 days a week scrolling very slowly across the map, checking that all of the transcriptions are correct, and that the pins are all the right colour. And in that time, I'm very pleased to say that I've finished Carmarthenshire, I have finished Pembrokeshire, I have finished Ceredigion, so Dyfed, done. Appropriate for today, isn't it? And I am currently 2 parishes into Meirionnydd. So by the time I retire, I hope to have finished. Anyway, tells you what gives you a grid reference. You can find it on a map. Tells you what parish we're in, what county we're in. Again, pre-1974 historical counties. And it tells you when this form of the name was recorded. And the word form is very important because Twll y Bwbach might well have been spelt various different ways across the centuries, as obviously the Welsh language develops naturally, and maybe the person writing it down doesn't speak Welsh and is trying to work out how to spell the word twll. Plus, of course, names change naturally. Maybe Twll y Bwbach had a completely different name previously or later. And we record absolutely everything. So it'll tell you the primary source where we got this, where we got this name from, which in this case is the 2nd edition 1900 OS map you can see here. Throughout the website, by the way, you can swap between the modern map and the 19 OS, which is always fun. And very soon we will also be adding aerial imagery. So you can get a nice satellite feed as well. Hopefully by the end of the month. And you can't see because it's cut off, but it also tells you your secondary source. So primary sources are things like maps, documents, etc. Secondary sources are going to be things like large crowdsourcing projects, or a collection of the place names of given area. There's also a comment section at the bottom for people to leave comments. These are generally on the lines of, what does this mean? Or, ooh, my grandmother lived here. If the comment is a question, I try and respond within 3 days. Now, stats. In the last financial year, we had 86,424 people visit the website, which is pretty good for a website like this. So far, they've left 112 comments on the bottoms of the pages. We've had 382 inquiries through the inquiry form, which can vary from anything to, I found a map in my attic and it's got some place names on it. Here's a picture, which is fantastic, by the way. If you have anything like that, please send it in. There's a place name near me and I don't know what it means. Could you explain? To my personal favourite, which was a man in America who's searching for the Holy Grail. On the basis of if a place name contains a personal name, and I'm not going to steal another glass, sorry, I'll just pour myself water like a civilised person. And that personal name appears in the Mabinogion, then clearly the place is named after the person in the Mabinogion. He has not found the Holy Grail yet. And I've been very unfair and haven't told him that it's upstairs here. Anyway, the most important stat of all, of course, is that... Oh, that's wrong. I forgot to as of just after I sent my slides in for this talk, we in fact have 708,126 place names in the list. Now, to give you some international context for this, the Irish government has a similar-ish project which has been running for about 12 years. And they had a kind of big relaunch on the 10th anniversary of the project, and I was over there. And they proudly announced that in those 10 years, 12,000 people had visited their website, and they had collected 25,000 place names. I was very polite. And the Scots have recently started a project looking at basically what is the correct Gaelic name for places in the Highlands. Because obviously most Scottish place names derive from Gaelic, but they've been written down by someone who did not have a clue what he was doing, like in Ireland. So they're now trying to find out what the actual proper Gaelic is. They've been going about a year or so, year and a half. They've got 3,000 names in their database currently. So Wales wins. Now, sources, 1,410 of them. I'm obviously not going to talk about each of them because we'd be here for the next month. And some of them are as simple as someone writes in and says, you haven't got my house name, here it is. But to give you an idea of the geographical distribution of names on the map on the left there, obviously the darker a parish is, the more names we have in it. So you can see a few obvious gaps. Ynys Môn. Historically, there's been a problem collecting place names in Ynys Môn. The tithe maps are dreadful. After about 3 parishes, they gave up. So that's the main culprit. But also, Edward Lloyd's parochial queries contains a grand total of 1 name from Ynys Môn. So obviously, people just don't like collecting place names in Ynys Môn. There's also a big Eryri-shaped gap up here, and obviously sort of, southern Pembrokeshire, sort of Monmouthshire, bit of Radnorshire there. You can see there are gaps. On the right, this is where we've added place names in the last financial year. So as you can see, we've tried to fill the gap in Ynys Môn. Got a lot up here, about which more later. Had a fantastic, huge estate sales catalogue sent to us from Carmarthenshire, which was great. And nice little commission project up in the northeast there as well. But as you can see from sort of these areas, it's a Wales-wide project. We don't focus on one area to the exclusion of others. If we get stuff, we'll add it in wherever it is. So, sources. The largest one is obviously the tithe maps, which, if you want to see them in all their glory with all of the attached tithe schedules, the National Library digitised them. It's all on their website, places.library.wales. It is a fantastic resource. And they were kind enough to give us all of the place names that come off it. Because, as you can see from the map, you have your field, you have your number, you can find it in the tithe schedule. It'll tell you the name of the field, who was working the field, who rents it, who owns the field overall. Oh God, really? And what type of field it is, and the name, etc. We've got 500,000 field names from this. Coverage varies. It's very good in Carmarthenshire, very good in Pembrokeshire, Ceredigion in a lot of places. They don't bother to record the individual field name, they just record the name of the farm. And it, as I say, in Ynys Môn, don't mention it. 1900 OS, second one, a second edition there. Obviously you get things like street names, geographical names, bridges, etc. 130,000 place names from that. Whilst important, those sources are quite late. The Centre for Advanced Welsh and Celtic Studies gave us access to their database of very early stuff. So this is medieval names and earlier, which obviously means we're not just dealing with Welsh and English anymore, are we? We're dealing with Anglo-Norman and Anglo-Saxon and Latin and Greek. The earliest names we've got in the list are from the 2nd century AD in Greek, from Ptolemy's Geography. So if you want to know how to say Carmarthen in ancient Greek, it's Moridonom, which basically means sea fort, because that's how far you can sail up the Towy, basically, isn't it? So they're in there. And that allows us to do things like this, which is build up a picture of how a place's name has developed over the centuries. So, earliest form of Aberystwyth we have from the 12th century is Aberystwyth. Welsh names don't change much, but we also have various forms calling it Abereidol. And that is because, of course, famously, Aberystwyth is in the wrong place. It's the Rheidol that flows through it, not the Ystwyth. But the reason it's called Aberystwyth is because the original Norman castle was on the banks of the Ystwyth, and later they built a better one on the banks of the Rheidol, but kept calling the place Aberystwyth. So you have this interesting period where people are obviously trying to, call it Abereidol because it's on the Rheidol. And that carries on till 1568. But otherwise, it's Aberystwyth throughout the centuries, and all fairly similar. We also got the database of place names from medieval Welsh poetry, again from the Centre for Advanced Welsh and Celtic Studies. So this is Welsh language names from the Middle Ages, basically, referenced in the bardic poetry. You know, precisely where did Mr. John slaughter the English in their thousands? You know, what's the name of his house where he's quite so generous to the poets and the food's so good? What was all that land he gave to the church because he's a fantastic Christian called? You know, you need to be using place names in bardic poetry almost constantly. And we've got about 4,000 of them in the list, of which 190 are in Ceredigion. Nice early example there, Corsfochno, goes back at least 900 years as a place name. This is the very dark area just north of Aberystwyth. Basically, this was taken from a farming family who have farmed in the area since at least 1577. And their son goes to school with my eldest, and in the car park his mother wandered over and said, "You're interested in history, aren't you?" "Yes, why?" "Oh, well, we've been, clearing out the farmhouse and we found this huge box of old papers. Do you want to have a look?" "Yeah, sure." Things like this. Every time the family got married or divorced or bought any land or sold any land or took anyone to court or got taken to court, which happened a lot, they kept the papers. So it is an absolutely fantastic resource for place names, because obviously, which bit of land did they sell? Name. They historically lived there at Llwyn-Glas, just outside Talabont. So it's mostly in that area, sort of, Talabont, Llandre, that sort of thing. But they had some land in Flintshire and they had some land in Montgomeryshire as well. So it crops up in various places. But as I say, basically all of the farms in this area just north of Aberystwyth, we've got historical forms of their names back to the 16th century. I will shut up at this point, but we're also collecting names in Eryri. And our latest thing is we've been given the archive that Gwynedd Pearce, Mr. Place Names himself, compiled over his 100-year life. And I've got a student volunteer going through it, and it's all from Gwent and Morgan and Glamorgan. So the work carries on and will carry on forever. Thanks very much.
Right, we're conscious it's lunchtime, but we can have a couple of quick questions if anybody has anything. It's from here first, and then we'll come to you.
Hi. Do you have, you probably do, a copy of the Llyfr Lloffion that was made about Pontfaen in Cymru in the 1950s, 60s, 70s? In the last century?
No, I don't, actually.
Talk to me over lunch.
Fantastic.
I've just always been curious, why Bow Street?
Well, Bow Street's actually 3 villages. There's Rhyd y Pennau up the top. In the middle is Penagarn, where Capel y Garn is. And then the bottom bit, where the post office was, is Nantr y Fallen. And the story goes that it was one of the priests from Gagerthan, spent a lot of time in London, being a squire, and he used to go drinking with his friends at a pub in Bow Street. And the story is that, in London, that is, and the story is that he invited them to come and stay with him and go drinking at his local tavern with the phrase, "Come and visit my Bow Street." Now, whether that's completely apocryphal, I don't know, but that's the story. But the reason it's still Bow Street is because in the 1960s, when obviously we were, redoing the road signs and having the Welsh names for things, or, correctly spelling the Welsh names for places, the good people of Rhyd y Pennau, Nantr y Fallen and Penagarn, all of which had grown into one kind of super village by this point, could not agree on which name should take precedence. And so Bow Street it has remained.
Can I just have a supplementary? I've been working on the women's peace petitions. Lots of house names in there. Have you been using that too?
Not yet, but it is on the very long list of things to do.
Okay, we'll leave it there as I'm very conscious it's lunchtime. So can I just stress you need to be back here. We're going to start probably at 2 o'clock. So please go and enjoy lunch. Pendinas is back towards the shop, but don't go outside, just carry on and you'll find the cafe there. And please do have a look at the exhibitions upstairs as well. So back here for 2 o'clock, please. Diolch yn fawr.